Core coming up in the next 30 minutes. After weeks of relentless and mounting pressure from fellow Democrats, U.S. President Joe Biden finally ends 2024 presidential bid, endorses Kamala Harris for Democratic nomination. The race for Democratic nomination for the presidential polls split wide open. Kamala Harris thanks Biden for endorsing her, wins 2024 backing of many Democrats, but many remain silent. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance go full throttle against Democratic leadership after Biden quits. Trump says Kamala Harris will be easier to defeat. Israel to send delegation for hostage deal talks with Hamas on Thursday. Prime Minister Netanyahu to leave for US to meet Biden for crucial talks. Indian Parliament session set to begin with tabling of the economic survey on Monday. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the union budget on Tuesday. After weeks of mounting pressure, United States President Joe Biden on Sunday dropped out of the November presidential election. In an unexpected announcement, U.S. President Joe Biden stated that he would not seek re-election. Biden said he will remain in his role as president until his term ends on January 20, 2025 and will address the nation this week. He emphasized the considerable progress made during his time, stating that America has the world's strongest economy. Biden expressed sincere thanks, saying that serving as president was the greatest honor of his life. The pressure on Biden to pull out started building up from within his party following a disastrous performance in the presidential debate on June 27th. In recent days, a flood of Democratic leaders, including members of Congress and influential supporters of the party, have called on him to step aside from the race. Joe Biden is the first sitting president since 1968 to drop out of a race. The 81-year-old Biden is the oldest person ever to have occupied the Oval Office. After ending his presidential campaign, U.S. President Joe Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. In a statement posted on social media platform X, Biden recalled that his first decision as the Democratic Party's nominee in 2020 was to choose Harris as his vice president and termed it the best decision he has made. Biden called on Democrats to come together and beat Republican president candidate Donald Trump. After Biden endorsed Kamala Harris, his vice president, to be the new Democratic nominee, Harris said she was honored to have the president's endorsement. Releasing a written statement and posting on social media platform X, Harris thanks Biden for his extraordinary leadership and decades of service to our country. She described Biden's decision to end his re-election bid as a selfless and patriotic act. Harris will be the first black woman to be a major party candidate for presidentship if chosen by her party at the Democratic National Convention, which begins on August 19th. All right, Mitch McCann joins us from New York. Mitch, good morning to you. Now, this was indeed this decision and this call by President Joe Biden has taken many by surprise. But then was it on the expected lines? And how do you gauge this sudden change of heart by President Joe Biden?
Well, good evening from the United States and good morning to you in India. This is an historic moment in US history, and it's one that some people predicted might happen. But Joe Biden, of course, over the last 24 days since that terrible CNN debate where he was heavily criticised, has dug his heels in. He said many times he was not going to stand down and believed consistently that he was the best person to run again for the President of the United States and, in his words, finish the job that he started. But really, at the end of the day, there was so much pressure on Joe Biden, not just from people close to him, but people in Congress, people in the Senate. He was losing support within his own party. If he had continued on and received this formal nomination, it would have been very difficult then for a number of those people to still campaign for Joe Biden after they'd already lost support for him and publicly said that they wanted him to step aside. So I think it was a surprise in the way that Joe Biden had said that he was going to continue on and then decided today that he would not. And just interestingly here, it's also important to note that it's been reported that only some of his senior staff knew about this only 1 minute before that message went out on social media. He didn't want any leaks, and he posted that on social media around 1:43 Eastern Time here in the US this afternoon.
All right, Mitch, what bearing will it have on the presidential race? Let us get more from you. The prospects of Kamala Harris. She is the first black woman, the first non-white woman to contest for presidentship in the US. But at the same time, Donald Trump did not miss to say that she will be easier to defeat. Put all this together, what effects or what fallout will it have on the presidential race?
Well, it could have a major impact. Obviously, what we've seen in the last couple of hours is Kamala Harris has accepted that endorsement for Joe Biden. Here's a little bit of what she had to say. I am honoured to have the president's endorsement and my intention is to earn and win this nomination, Kamala Harris said. Over the past year, I have travelled across the country talking with Americans about the clear choice in this momentous election. And this is what's happening at the moment, and this is very important. A number of prominent Democrats, her colleagues, have endorsed her already. Of course, there's Joe Biden, but there's also Gavin Newsom from California, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, and there's a number of more low-level Democrats supporting her as well. So what we're seeing at the moment is a real coalescing of Democrats around Kamala Harris, many people choosing not to take her on and contest that nomination. So far, it is full steam ahead for Kamala Harris against Donald Trump, but we're still waiting to see in the coming hours and in the coming days if anyone is going to contest that nomination against her.
All right, Mitch, also talking of prospects of Kamala Harris, now the decision of President Joe Biden will finally be stamped at the National Convention. Now, this begins on August 19, but at the same time, we also tell our viewers that there are some members of the Democratic Party who are still hesitant and skeptical to endorse Kamala Harris's candidature. What do you have to say about this, and how easy, or for that matter, how difficult would it be to for Kamala Harris to embark on this journey?
Well, to your first point, there is some people that are not endorsing her at this stage. And one of those, one of the most prominent people is Barack and Michelle Obama. They haven't endorsed Kamala Harris, even though they know her very well. And part of the reason for that, according to reports, is that Barack Obama wants to play an impartial role. He doesn't want to favour anyone, and that he wants to let the process, a fair process, play out. We've also seen no endorsement from the likes of Nancy Pelosi, someone who is very well known outside of the US. She was the former Speaker of the House. They're not endorsing Kamala Harris at this stage. It's reported that's not because they don't like Kamala Harris, it's because they want to, be impartial to the process. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not Kamala Harris can move forward without their endorsements. But as I say, at the moment, she is full steam ahead. The way this will play out is that if no one challenges Kamala Harris, she will become essentially the presumptive nominee and the nominee at the convention. Or before that, if there's a virtual roll call of the delegates, we don't know if that's going to happen at the moment. But the way things stand at the moment, no one is challenging Kamala Harris just yet. So it looks as if she will be the nominee for the Democratic Party. But as we know, a lot can change in a few minutes or a few hours, as we've seen in the last few weeks.
All right, Mitch, what reactions are you picking up from the US? This is indeed, it did send surprise waves across the world when we learned that Joe Biden will not be competing for presidency. But then what reactions are you picking up from the US?
From what I've seen across social media, it's very positive for Kamala Harris. A lot of people are supporting her. You have to remember that Americans really wanted a younger candidate from either party. That has been what polls reflected for a very long time. Now they might finally have one in Kamala Harris. So I think there's some positivity on social media, but at the same time, we have to look at what the Republicans are saying and Donald Trump. And I want to read you a social media post from Donald Trump about the Democratic Party, in particular Joe Biden, what he had to say this afternoon. He said this: "Does anybody really believe that Crooked Joe had COVID? No, he wanted to get out ever since June 27, the night of the debate, where he was completely obliterated. That was the big moment in Joe Biden's demise. That was the point in time when Joe was revealed for what he is, an incompetent man who should have never been president." So while we are seeing some positive support for Kamala Harris on the side of Democrats, the Republicans are digging in. And as you mentioned at the top of this piece, Donald Trump has actually said at one point recently that Kamala Harris would be easier to beat than Joe Biden.
All right, Mitch. Now, this age factor was a very prominent, point, a very prominent bone of contention between the candidates vying for presidentship. Having said that, now that Kamala Harris, a younger candidate, will be there for, representing the Democratic Party, which will be stamped at the National Convention, beginning August 19th. What is your evaluation, very quickly, your closing comments on how is the presidential contest poised from here on? Because this age factor was a very prominent factor in the U.S.
Yeah, well, this could play a major factor in the election. There's only 3.5 months to go, and it could be a possibility that a number of younger Americans are more energized in the process. I talk to Americans every day, and people even internationally say to me, is this the best two candidates that the US has? And really the answer is no. There's many more candidates that could be running for the presidency of the United States. There's a number of governors and senators that are viewed as energetic and possible future nominees. Now, the US finally has someone and a younger candidate as Kamala Harris, but it remains to be seen whether she will be able to energize younger and more, many more voters. And we're likely to see that in the polls, which will be coming out in the next few days. So it's a possibility. We don't know for sure just yet, but it's possible that Kamala Harris may reinvigorate voters across America to get involved in this election. Now there is a younger candidate at the top of the ticket.
All right, Mitch, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in with those inputs and that analysis from New York. And U.S. President Joe Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party after opting out of the race. If Biden's endorsement is accepted, Kamala Harris will become the first non-white woman and the first Indian origin woman to contest the U.S. presidential elections. Harris, a former U.S. Senator and California Attorney General, is the first African American and Asian person to serve as the vice president. Her 3.5-year White House tenure has been characterized by a staff turnover and early policy portfolios, including migration from Central America. Influential Democrats have signaled Harris would be the best option to lead the ticket. Some on Wall Street are starting to indicate her as a preference. Recent polls suggest Harris could do better than Biden against Trump, the Republican candidate. Some Democrats believe Harris could energize Democratic-leaning groups, including black voters. As the vice president, Harris's public Israel strategy is identical to Biden's. She was the first senior leader of the U.S. government to call for a ceasefire in March. Since the Supreme Court repealed women's constitutional right to abortion in 2022, Harris has become Biden administration's foremost voice on reproductive rights. Harris would take over money raised by Biden campaign and inherit campaign infrastructure, a critical advantage with just 4 months before Election Day on November 5th. All right, this brings us to the next question. What next after Biden pulls out? Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to fight in his place. Kamala Harris may continue the campaign in place of Biden. Democrats will start expressing support or oppose her. Other candidates may also express their willingness to be the nominee. Convention of the Democrats will take place from 19 to 22nd of August in Chicago. A total of 4,700 Democratic delegates will vote to select a nominee in case of a fight. The convention will formally endorse her to be Democratic candidate. On her part, she can continue campaigning. She can utilize the donations collected by Biden for campaign. The candidates would have to go for mini primary in 50 states and other territories. Many Democrats on Sunday quickly backed Vice President Kamala Harris to run as the party's presidential nominee against Donald Trump. All the 50 Democratic Party state chairs have thrown their weight behind Vice President Kamala Harris to be the party's new presidential nominee. The chairs held a conference call on Sunday after President Biden announced that he was stepping aside as the party's candidate. Tennessee Democratic National Convention delegates also unanimously voted on Sunday to support Harris for the Democratic presidential election. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who has himself been mentioned as a possible Democratic candidate to replace Joe Biden in recent weeks, has now endorsed Kamala Harris for president. Colorado Governor Rod Polis, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Pennsylvania Governor Joe Shapiro, U.S. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, U.S. Senator Patty Murray of Washington State, U.S. Representative James Clyburn of South Carolina, and U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal of Massachusetts also endorsed Kamala Harris. Former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, who served as Secretary of State under President Barack Obama, also endorsed Harris in a statement. Hours after U.S. President Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race, former U.S. President Barack Obama issued a statement on Sunday. Obama weighed in on his former vice president's unprecedented decision to step aside for what Biden said was for the good of the Democratic Party and the country. Notably, Obama did not name or endorse Vice President Kamala Harris to be the nominee, even though Biden said that she had full support and endorsement. In a statement, former U.S. President Barack Obama has praised Joe Biden as a patriot of the highest order, saying the U.S. president had put American interests ahead of his own as he decided not to seek re-election. And reactions from foreign leaders and officials started pouring on U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to end his campaign to seek re-election in November. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon on X wrote, and I quote him, "President Biden has dedicated his life to public service, and that is something that deserves much respect. I thank the President for his leadership of the United States and his commitment to New Zealand, and I look forward to working with him for the remainder of his presidency." German Chancellor Olaf Scholz wrote, "Joe Biden has achieved a great deal for his country, for Europe, for the world. Thanks to him, transatlantic cooperation is close, NATO is strong, and the U.S. is a good and reliable partner for us. His decision not to run again deserves recognition." British Prime Minister Keir Starmer wrote, and I quote him, "I respect President Biden's decision and I look forward to us working together during the remainder of his presidency." Starmer said in a statement, "I know that as he has done throughout his remarkable career, President Biden will have made his decision based on what he believes is in the best interests of the American people." Former U.S. President and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump responded to Joe Biden's decision to end his campaign. He said that he thinks Vice President Kamala Harris will be easier to defeat in November's election against Biden. Trump also attacked Biden and Harris on social media while saying that Biden was unfit to continue serving as president. On his Truth Social platform, Trump wrote, and I quote him, that the country has suffered greatly because of Biden's presidency, but we will remedy the damage he has done very quickly. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson called for President Joe Biden to resign immediately, shortly after the incumbent announced that he was dropping out of the presidential race. The Louisiana representative wrote on social media platform X on Sunday afternoon, I quote, "If Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. He must resign the office immediately." In the post, Johnson called this an unprecedented juncture in American history. He criticized the Democratic Party, saying the self-proclaimed party of democracy has proven exactly the opposite by removing Biden from the presidential ticket. He said the party invalidated the votes of more than 14 million Americans who selected Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee for president. In response to various rallies demanding a deal to release hostages from Gaza, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday decided to bring the country back to the negotiating table for a hostages for ceasefire deal in Gaza. Netanyahu's office issued a statement stating that Israel will send a delegation charged with negotiating a hostage deal with Hamas on Thursday. However, the statement did not mention details about Netanyahu's U.S. visit, considering the demands by Israelis for him to stay back in the country. Netanyahu is bound to leave for the U.S. today. Fears are growing of a wider regional conflict in the Middle East as hostilities step up between Israel and the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry says it is following the developments with great concern, urging maximum restraint from both the parties. DD India's Sarah Coates has more from Tel Aviv.
Israel continues to say that it will strike at anyone who hits anyone here in Israel and causes damage, causes death. So it's certainly a very concerning situation. And this is one of the reasons that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is travelling to Washington over the next day. He'll be meeting with the US President Joe Biden, who continues to send his top diplomats to the region as part of this shuttle diplomacy to really try and bring down tensions in the region. But it's not just tension between Israel and the Houthis. We also need to remember the deteriorating situation on Israel's northern border with Lebanon amid these daily tit-for-tat strikes between Israel and Hezbollah, with a number of fires burning in northern Israel, the result of drones, rockets sent over from southern Lebanon as Israel continues to hit what it is calling Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. So certainly a very worrying situation, a situation that world players, international players want to bring down as soon as possible, really amid fear that all of this could potentially drag the region into a wider regional conflict, which could in turn draw in Iran. In Tel Aviv, Sarah Coates reporting for DD India.
Business resumed in Bangladesh's capital on Sunday when curfew eased after the Supreme Court scrapped most government job quotas. The quotas on government jobs had sparked deadly student-led protests, killing at least 114 people in Bangladesh. The protest included reserving 30% of government positions for the families of those who fought for independence from Pakistan. Dismissing a lower court order, the Supreme Court directed that 93% of the government jobs in the country should be open to candidates on merit. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government has scrapped the quota system in 2018, but the lower court reinstated it last month, pegging total quotas at 56%, sparking the protests and an ensuing government crackdown. More than 1,500 U.S. flights have been cancelled for the third day straight as airlines struggle to recover from a global tech outage that left thousands of passengers stranded at airports. Although airlines began to resume operations, companies were dealing with backlogs of delayed and cancelled flights, leaving passengers frustrated. A software update by global cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike triggered systems problems that grounded flights, forced broadcasters off air, and left customers without access to services such as healthcare or banking. Out of more than 110,000 scheduled commercial flights on Friday, 5,000 had been cancelled globally, with more expected. The U.S. carrier Delta Airlines said it expected additional delays and cancellations through the weekend. And back home, after the first session that undertook oath ceremony post the Lok Sabha elections, the Indian Parliament will commence again from July 22nd and continue till August 12th. While the key highlights of the session, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will table the economic survey in Parliament on Monday. Also, Union Budget will be presented by the Finance Minister on Tuesday. The session will also get Parliament North for budget of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir for 2024. Tentatively, 6 items of legislative business and 3 items of financial business have been identified for being taken up during this session. In sports, with just days left before the opening ceremony of the Paris 2024 Games, the Olympic torch relay meandered through the suburbs of the capital city and was even carried in the world's longest rowing boat. The flame made stops at some of area's castles, including the impressive Chateau de Vincennes, where throngs of onlookers cheered the torchbearers down the route. Finally, a torchbearer carried the flame onto the longest rowing boat in the world to take a spin down River Man. The relay will continue on Monday and will culminate with the lighting of the cauldron in the host city Paris during the opening ceremony of the Games. The 2024 Paris Olympics will be held from July 26 to August 11th. A group of 10 highly skilled dogs from various Indian forces has been deployed in France to ensure safety and security of different locations during the Paris Olympics. The canine teams, accompanied by their handlers, will be responsible for sniffing and patrolling duties at various event venues. Also, this is the first ever collaboration of canine squads between the Indian and the French governments. All right, that's it in this edition of DD India Live. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can scan the QR codes on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us at in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.